First time Dr. Elena Vasquez witnessed the Alcubierre Chen drive-fold space-time like origami in the hands of a master craftsman, she knew humanity had crossed a threshold from which there would be no return. Standing in the observation deck of Luna Station's most secure facility, her breath fogged against the reinforced titanium glass as she watched the prototype vessel Prometheus disappear into a ripple of distorted starlight, only to reappear 3 astronomical units away in the blink of an eye. The mathematical impossibility of it all should have thrilled her. After all, she had spent the last 15 years of her life perfecting the quantum field equations that made this moment possible. Instead, a cold dread settled in her stomach like a stone dropped into still water. Behind her, the assembled dignitaries from the Terran Council erupted in polite applause, their carefully modulated voices carrying the kind of restrained excitement that only politicians and bureaucrats could muster when witnessing the birth of a new age. Ambassador Chen Wei-Ming, the silver-haired diplomat whose grandfather had first theorized the mathematical framework for faster-than-light travel, stepped forward with the measured gait of a man who understood the weight of history pressing down upon his shoulders. His dark eyes, Elena noticed, held none of the wonder she had expected to see. Instead, they reflected something far more troubling, the calculating gleam of someone already 3 moves ahead in a game that hadn't even begun. "Magnificent work, Dr. Vasquez," Chen said, his voice carrying the slight accent of someone who had learned English as a 3rd language but spoke it better than most native speakers. "The Council is most impressed with the progress your team has made. Most impressed indeed." He paused, letting his gaze drift to the view screen where the Prometheus was conducting its return journey, space bending around it like heated glass. "Tell me, what is the current range limitation of the drive system?" Elena felt her throat constrict. She had known this question would come, had rehearsed her answer 1,000 times in the mirror of her cramped quarters aboard Luna Station, but somehow the words felt like lead weights on her tongue. "Theoretical calculations suggest we could reach Proxima Centauri in approximately 14 days, she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "With refinements to the quantum field generators, we might cut that down to 10 days within the next 5 years. The implications hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. 14 days to reach humanity's nearest stellar neighbor, a journey that had previously required tens of thousands of years, even at relativistic speeds. The assembled council members exchanged glances that spoke volumes about the conversations they had been having in private chambers, far from the ears of the scientists and engineers who had made this miracle possible. Director Sarah Okafor of the African Continental Union stepped forward, her elaborately braided hair catching the artificial light of the observation deck. Elena had always respected Okafor. The woman had built her reputation on uncompromising honesty and a fierce dedication to human progress. But now, looking into those intelligent brown eyes, Elena saw something that made her stomach clench with anxiety. Okafor was afraid, and when a woman who had stared down warlords and climate disasters showed fear, it meant the rest of humanity should be terrified. "Dr. Vasquez," Okafor began, her Nigerian accent lending gravity to every syllable, "your achievement represents perhaps the greatest leap forward in human capability since we first learned to harness fire. But I must ask, and please understand that this question comes from a place of profound respect for your work, have you considered the societal implications of instantaneous interstellar travel?" The question hit Elena like a physical blow. Of course she had considered the implications. She had lain awake countless nights in her narrow bunk, staring at the curved ceiling of Luna Station and imagining what would happen when humanity suddenly had the entire galaxy spread before them like an infinite buffet. She had run computer simulations modeling the economic disruption that would occur when the fundamental limitations of space and time no longer applied to human civilization. She had read the classified reports about civil unrest in the outer colonies, where rumors of FTL technology had already sparked riots among populations who felt abandoned by Earth's increasingly centralized government. But more than that, she had seen the look in the eyes of her research team when they realized what they had accomplished. Dr. James Morrison, her lead engineer, had actually wept when the first test succeeded, not from joy, but from a kind of existential terror that seemed to reach into his very soul. "Elena," he had whispered that night, his usually steady hands shaking as he poured himself a third glass of synthetic whiskey. "Do you realize what we've done? We've just handed the keys to the universe to a species that can barely manage to share a single planet." Elena pulled herself back to the present, aware that the silence had stretched too long. "Director Okafor," she said carefully, "the drive technology itself is merely a tool. Like any tool, its value depends entirely upon how humanity chooses to use it. We stand at a crossroads where we can either use this breakthrough to unite our species in common purpose, spreading life and consciousness throughout the galaxy, or—" She let the sentence hang unfinished, unwilling to voice the darker possibilities that haunted her dreams. "Or we can use it to wage war on a scale previously unimaginable," completed Ambassador Chen, his tone as neutral as if he were discussing weather patterns. "Dr. Vasquez, you must understand that the Council has been grappling with these very questions for months, ever since your preliminary report suggested that FTL travel might be achievable within our lifetimes. We have consulted with economists, sociologists, military strategists, and philosophers. The consensus is troubling." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. "What kind of consensus?" Chen glanced at his fellow council members, some silent communication passing between them like electricity through a completed circuit. When he turned back to Elena, his expression had hardened into the mask of diplomatic necessity. "The kind that suggests humanity may not be ready for the power you have placed in our hands. Consider the facts, Dr. Vasquez. Our species has never successfully managed a transition from scarcity to abundance. Every time in human history when a new frontier has opened, it has led to conflict, exploitation, and ultimately the domination of the weak by the strong. The Americas, the oceans, the skies, orbital space, each new realm has followed the same pattern." Director Okafor nodded grimly. "Our sociological models indicate that unrestricted access to FTL technology would likely result in the fragmentation of human civilization within 50 years. Different colonies would develop divergent cultures and interests. Trade wars would escalate into shooting wars. And with FTL capabilities, a single malicious actor could potentially sterilize entire star systems before anyone could respond." Elena felt the walls of the observation deck closing in around her. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She had devoted her life to expanding the boundaries of human knowledge, to giving her species the tools they needed to transcend their earthly limitations and become something greater. The idea that her greatest achievement might be suppressed, locked away in some vault to gather dust while humanity continued to stagnate in their single solar system, filled her with a rage so profound it made her hands shake. "So what are you saying?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "That we should abandon 15 years of research? That we should pretend this breakthrough never happened?" Ambassador Chen's smile held no warmth whatsoever. "Not abandon, Dr. Vasquez. Control. The Council has voted to classify the FTL drive technology at the highest possible security level. Access will be restricted to a small number of carefully vetted individuals, and deployment will occur only under strict Council oversight. We simply cannot risk allowing this technology to proliferate freely throughout human space." The words hit Elena like hammer blows. She thought of her team, brilliant men and women who had sacrificed careers, relationships, and years of their lives to achieve this breakthrough. She thought of Dr. Morrison, whose daughter lived on Mars and whom he hadn't seen in person for 3 years because of the travel time limitations. She thought of the colonists struggling to survive in the outer system, who had been promised that new technologies would eventually make their lives easier, more connected to the rest of humanity. And then she thought of something else, something that made her blood run cold with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. The Council thought they could control this technology, lock it away in their vaults, and parcel it out according to their political calculations. But they didn't understand the true nature of what she had created. The Alcubierre drive wasn't just a propulsion system. It was a fundamental reimagining of humanity's relationship with the universe itself. And Elena had built certain safeguards into the design, safeguards that she had never mentioned in her reports to the Council. Hidden deep within the quantum field generator's control algorithms was a piece of code that Elena had written during a sleepless night 6 months ago when she had first begun to suspect that the Council might try to suppress her work. It was elegant in its simplicity, a small subroutine that would broadcast the complete technical specifications of the FTL drive to every scientific institution, university, and research facility in human space if certain trigger conditions were met. Elena had called it the Prometheus Protocol, after the mythological figure who had stolen fire from the gods and given it to humanity, accepting eternal punishment for his act of defiance. As she stood there listening to Ambassador Chen outline the Council's plans for her life's work, Elena made a decision that would change the course of human history. Her fingers moved almost imperceptibly to the small quantum communicator on her wrist, inputting the activation sequence she had memorized months ago. In laboratories and universities across the solar system, quantum computers would soon begin, receiving data packets containing everything humanity needed to build their own FTL drives. The Council wanted to control the fire, but Elena Vasquez was about to give it to everyone. The first indication that something had gone catastrophically wrong came not from Earth's intelligence networks or the Council's sophisticated monitoring systems, but from a 17-year-old engineering student named Marcus Chen on Europa Station, who happened to be pulling an all-nighter in the university's quantum computing lab. At Aero 347 Central European Time, exactly 17 minutes after Elena had activated the Prometheus Protocol, Marcus watched in bewilderment as his terminal began displaying technical schematics that made his undergraduate brain feel like it was melting. "Professor Nakamura," he called out to his thesis advisor, who was hunched over a coffee-stained workstation in the corner of the lab. "You need to see this. My system just started downloading something massive from... I don't even know where." Dr. Keiko Nakamura, a woman whose reputation for brilliance was matched only by her legendary inability to function before consuming at least 4 cups of synthetic coffee, looked up from her calculations with the glazed expression of someone who had been wrestling with quantum field equations for the past 6 hours. When she saw what was displayed on Marcus's screen, however, her fatigue evaporated like ice in vacuum. "Dear God," she whispered, her fingers flying across the holographic interface as she scrolled through page after page of technical specifications. "These are the blueprints for an Alcubierre drive, a working Alcubierre drive." She turned to Marcus, her dark eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and terror. "Do you understand what this means? Someone has just handed us the keys to the entire galaxy." What Dr. Nakamura didn't know was that identical scenes were playing out in research facilities across the solar system. At Cambridge University on Earth, a graduate student in theoretical physics named Sarah O'Brien was staring at her computer screen in stunned silence as terabytes of data flooded her university's quantum storage banks. On Mars University's Olympia campus, Dr. Pavel Volkov was frantically trying to make sense of the engineering specifications that had just appeared in his personal research files, while his hands shook so badly he could barely operate his tablet. But perhaps the most significant recipient of Elena's gift was someone she had never met and whose existence she couldn't have imagined in her wildest nightmares. In the depths of Titan's methane clouds, Aboard a research station that didn't appear on any official registry, Dr. Yuki Tanaka received the Prometheus Protocol's data dump with a smile that would have frozen Elena's blood in her veins. Dr. Tanaka had once been Elena's colleague back in the early days of the FTL research program. They had worked together, published papers together, even shared a brief romantic relationship that had ended amicably when their career paths diverged. But while Elena had remained within the Council's official research framework, Yuki had chosen a different path. One that led through the shadowy world of corporate espionage, military black projects, and technologies so dangerous that even the Council's most hawkish members wouldn't sanction their development. For the past 3 years, Yuki had been working for Nexus Dynamics, a megacorporation that existed in the legal gray areas between Earth's various governmental jurisdictions. Officially, Nexus was involved in asteroid mining and deep space exploration. Unofficially, they were developing weapon systems that could make entire solar systems uninhabitable, all under the guise of defensive research and terraforming technologies. As Yuki absorbed the technical specifications streaming across her private terminal, her mind was already racing ahead to the implications. The Alcubierre Chen drive that Elena had developed was remarkable in its elegance, but Yuki could see ways to modify it, to weaponize it in ways that would make traditional nuclear weapons seem like firecrackers by comparison. Imagine, she thought, with growing excitement, a drive system that could accelerate a tungsten rod to near-light speed before dropping out of FTL directly above a populated planet. The kinetic energy release would dwarf anything in humanity's current arsenal. But even as these dark thoughts raced through her mind, Yuki was interrupted by an urgent communication from her supervisor, Director Harrison Webb, whose scarred face filled her private holodisplay with an expression of barely contained fury. "Tanaka," Webb growled, his gravelly voice distorted by the quantum encryption protocols that protected Nexus's communications. "I trust you're seeing what we're all seeing. Someone just gave away the most valuable technology in human history to every 2-bit research lab and university in the solar system." "I'm analyzing the specifications now," Yuki replied, her voice carefully neutral. She had learned long ago not to show too much enthusiasm when dealing with Webb. The man had a talent for turning even the most positive developments into reasons for paranoia and violence. "The technical sophistication is extraordinary. Whoever developed this has solved problems that our best theorists said were impossible." "That's Dr. Elena Vasquez," Webb said, spitting out the name like a curse. "Former Council Golden Girl, current pain in our collective ass. Our intelligence sources tell us she activated some kind of dead man's switch during a demonstration for the Council earlier today. Apparently, she didn't appreciate their plans for controlling her technology." Yuki felt her heart skip a beat at the mention of Elena's name. Despite everything that had happened between them, despite the years and the divergent paths their careers had taken, she still felt a complex mixture of admiration and affection for her former colleague. Elena had always been driven by noble ideals, by a genuine desire to improve the human condition. It was both her greatest strength and, in Yuki's opinion, her most dangerous weakness. "What are our orders?" Yuki asked, though she already suspected the answer. Webb's smile was as cold and sharp as a blade. "Nexus has been authorized to take any necessary measures to secure this technology for our exclusive use. The Board of Directors has classified this as a code black situation, total operational freedom, unlimited resources, no questions asked. Your job, Dr. Tanaka, is to find Dr. Vasquez and convince her to work with us voluntarily. And if she refuses," he didn't need to finish the sentence. Yuki had worked for Nexus long enough to understand the company's approach to personnel management. Cooperation was always preferred, but it was never actually required. Meanwhile, back on Luna Station, Elena was discovering that triggering a revolution was significantly easier than controlling its consequences. The first sign of trouble came when her personal communication array lit up like a Christmas tree, flooded with incoming messages from researchers, students, government officials, and corporate representatives from across the solar system. The second sign came when Director Marcus Thompson, the head of Luna Station's security division, burst into her quarters without bothering to announce himself. "Dr. Vasquez," Thompson said, his usually composed demeanor cracking under the strain of whatever crisis was unfolding beyond Elena's quarters. "We need to talk. Now." Elena looked up from her personal tablet, where she had been watching news feeds from across the solar system with a mixture of pride and growing horror. The story was spreading faster than wildfire in dry grass. "Rogue scientist leaks FTL technology. The drive that could end civilization. Council authority challenged by Prometheus protocol." Every major news outlet was running variations of the same story, and the public reaction was intense. "I assume this is about the data transmission I authorized earlier today," Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. Thompson's laugh held no humor whatsoever. "Authorized? Dr. Vasquez, you just triggered the greatest security breach in human history. Do you have any idea what's happening out there right now?" He activated his portable holodisplay, filling Elena's small quarters with a three-dimensional map of the solar system. Red warning lights blinked at dozens of locations. Research facilities, universities, corporate installations, and military bases where the Prometheus protocol's data was being received and analyzed. "Riots have broken out on Mars," Thompson continued, his voice rising with each word. "The corporate mining consortium is mobilizing their security forces because they think the outer colonies are about to declare independence. 3 different terrorist organizations have claimed responsibility for what they're calling the liberation of human potential, and our intelligence analysts estimate that at least 6 major corporations are already mobilizing Black Ops teams to secure the technology for themselves." Elena felt the blood drain from her face as the full magnitude of what she had unleashed began to sink in. She had anticipated political upheaval, economic disruption, and social change. But she hadn't considered the possibility that her gift to humanity might immediately trigger a series of conflicts that could tear human civilization apart at the seams. "There's more," Thompson said, and somehow his tone managed to convey that the worst was yet to come. "Ambassador Chen has issued a warrant for your arrest on charges of treason, espionage, and crimes against humanity. The Council is voting on whether to declare martial law across all human-controlled territories. And..." He paused, seeming to gather himself for whatever he was about to say next. "And we've lost contact with the Prometheus." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. The Prometheus was still conducting test flights with the prototype FTL drive, its crew unaware that their technology had just become the most contested resource in human space. If something had happened to them, if they had been captured or destroyed by one of the corporate or military factions now scrambling to secure FTL technology. "What do you mean, lost contact?" Elena asked, though part of her already knew the answer would be worse than anything she could imagine. Thompson's expression grew even grimmer. "The ship disappeared from our tracking systems approximately 30 minutes ago. Last transmission indicated they were preparing for a routine test jump to the outer asteroid belt. They should have been back by now." Elena closed her eyes, trying to process the cascade of disasters that seemed to be flowing from her single moment of defiant idealism. She had wanted to democratize the future, to ensure that the benefits of FTL technology would be shared by all of humanity, rather than hoarded by a powerful few. Instead, she had apparently triggered a gold rush that might end in the extinction of human civilization. But even as despair threatened to overwhelm her, Elena felt a spark of something else, a grim determination that reminded her why she had become a scientist in the first place. The universe was vast and complex and often hostile, but it could be understood. Problems could be solved. Damage could be mitigated. And sometimes, when the stakes were high enough, even the most brilliant Minds had to accept that they might need help from unexpected sources. "Director Thompson," she said, opening her eyes and meeting his gaze with renewed resolve. "I need to send a message to Dr. Yuki Tanaka on Titan Station." Thompson's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "The corporate researcher? Dr. Vasquez, I don't think you understand the gravity of the situation. Dr. Tanaka works for Nexus Dynamics, and our intelligence reports suggest they're one of the primary actors trying to weaponize your technology." Elena nodded grimly. "I know exactly who she works for. But right now, Yuki might be the only person in the solar system with the resources and motivation to help me fix what I've broken. Besides," she added with a bitter smile, "it's not like the situation can get any worse." As if the universe had been waiting for her to voice that particular thought, Thompson's communication device began blaring with an emergency alert that made both of them freeze in terror. The automated voice that filled Elena's quarters was the same one used for asteroid collision warnings and solar flare alerts. The voice that every human in the solar system had been trained from childhood to obey without question. "Attention. All stations and vessels," the voice announced with mechanical calm. "Long-range sensors have detected multiple unidentified objects moving at superluminal velocities toward the inner solar system. Estimated time to arrival, 14 hours. All. Civilian traffic is hereby ordered to seek immediate shelter in the nearest fortified facility. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Elena and Thompson stared at each other in horrified silence as the implications sank in. 14 hours was exactly the travel time Elena had quoted to Ambassador Chen for a journey from Proxima Centauri, which meant that either humanity's first contact with an alien civilization was about to occur under the worst possible circumstances, or something far more terrifying was heading toward Earth. The age of FTL travel, Elena realized with growing horror, had lasted exactly 6 hours before potentially ending human civilization forever. 12 hours after the emergency alert that had frozen the solar system in terror, Captain Maria Santos of the Earth Defense Force vessel Valkyrie found herself staring at sensor readings that defied every principle of physics she had learned during her 20-year military career. The unidentified objects weren't just moving at faster-than-light speeds. They were doing things that should have been impossible, even with the miraculous Alcubierre Shen drive technology. "Captain," called out Lieutenant Commander James Park from his position at the tactical station, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "The lead bogey just split into 17 separate contacts. Each one is maintaining independent FTL velocities while executing coordinated maneuvers that would require instantaneous communication across light years of space." Santos felt her stomach clench as she processed the implications. Even with quantum entanglement communication systems, the kind of coordinated movement they were witnessing should have been impossible. Unless these weren't human vessels at all, but something far more advanced than anything in Earth's arsenal. "Time to intercept?" she asked, though she already knew the answer would be measured in minutes rather than hours. "At current velocity, the formation will reach Earth's defensive perimeter in 93 minutes, Park replied. "Captain, our weapon systems aren't designed to engage targets moving at FTL speeds. If these are hostile contacts..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone on the bridge understood that humanity's first contact with an alien civilization might also be their last. But while the Valkyrie and the rest of Earth's defense fleet prepared for what might be an unwinnable battle, a very different drama was unfolding in the corporate boardroom of Nexus Dynamics' primary orbital facility. Director Harrison Webb stood before a holographic display showing the approaching alien fleet. His scarred features twisted into an expression of grim satisfaction that would have chilled Elena Vasquez to the bone had she been present to witness it. "Ladies and gentlemen," Webb addressed the assembled board members, his voice carrying the weight of a man who had just been handed the keys to ultimate power, We are looking at the greatest opportunity in human history. While the Earth Defense Force prepares to soil themselves at the first sign of superior alien technology, Nexus Dynamics has been preparing for exactly this moment. Board Chair. Patricia Vance, a woman whose reputation for ruthless efficiency had made her one of the most feared executives in corporate space, leaned forward in her chair. Explain, Harrison. How exactly does an alien invasion constitute an opportunity rather than an existential threat? As the board members of Nexus Dynamics stared at Elena's image, each of them silently calculating the odds of success and the consequences of failure, Yuki Tanaka made a decision that would either save human civilization or ensure its destruction. In the most spectacular fashion imaginable. "Elena," she said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence of the boardroom. "Transmit your specifications. Nexus Dynamics is officially at your disposal." The last great war of human history was about to begin, and it would be fought not between nations or ideologies, but between the past and the future, with the survival of an entire species hanging in the balance. With 43 minutes remaining until Admiral Cross's ultimatum expired, Elena Vasquez found herself doing something that would have been unimaginable just 24 hours earlier, coordinating the defense of humanity from the bridge of a stolen research vessel with the most unlikely alliance in human history, hanging on every word she spoke. The main view screen of the Icarus displayed a tactical hologram that would have given seasoned military strategists nightmares. 17 crimson dots representing the Outer Reach Collective's fleet moved in perfect formation toward Earth, their FTL signatures painting streaks of impossible mathematics across the fabric of space-time itself. But what made Elena's heart race wasn't the approaching fleet. It was the desperate beauty of what humanity was attempting to accomplish in the face of annihilation. "Dr. Vasquez," came Captain Santos's voice through the quantum communication link, her professional composure cracking under the strain of coordinating a defense that violated every principle of military doctrine. "The Valkyrie is in position at Luna L4. We've successfully integrated the Nexus weapon systems with our targeting computers, but I have to ask, are you absolutely certain this is going to work?" Elena looked at the readings streaming across her personal display, where the hastily constructed quantum interference array was drawing power from every available source in the Earth-Luna system. Mining platforms, orbital habitats, research. Stations and even luxury spacecraft had volunteered their fusion reactors to power humanity's last desperate gambit. The sheer audacity of what they were attempting would have been laughable under any other circumstances. "Captain," Elena replied, her voice steadier than she felt, "I'm certain that the mathematics are sound. Whether we can execute them in time with improvised equipment and a command structure that was assembled 30 minutes ago, that remains to be seen." The plan was simultaneously elegant and insane. Rather than trying to destroy the collective's fleet, which would be impossible given their FTL capabilities and superior numbers, Elena had proposed something far more ambitious. They would use a coordinated quantum interference pattern generated by every available power source in the inner solar system to create what she had dubbed a reality anchor, a region of space where the fundamental constants of physics would be temporarily altered, making FTL travel impossible. If it worked, the collective fleet would be forced to drop out of FTL within Earth's defensive perimeter, where conventional weapons could engage them. If it failed, Earth would be obliterated in approximately 40 minutes. "Elena," came Yuki's voice from her laboratory on Titan, where she was frantically calibrating the quantum field generators that Nexus had contributed to the defense effort. "I'm reading some concerning fluctuations in the interference pattern. The field generators on the outer stations are operating beyond their design parameters. If we push them much harder, we're going to start losing equipment to catastrophic overload." Elena felt sweat beading on her forehead as she processed the implications. The reality anchor required precise calibration across dozens of widely separated installations, each contributing a specific frequency of quantum interference to create the desired effect. If they lost even a few generators, the entire pattern would collapse, and with it, humanity's only hope of survival. "How much longer can we maintain current power levels?" Elena asked, though she already suspected the answer would be measured. "In minutes rather than hours." 15 minutes, maybe 20 if we're lucky, Yuki replied. "After that, we start losing stations one by one until the entire network collapses." Elena closed her eyes and tried to shut out the cacophony of voices filling the communication channels. Military commanders coordinating their forces, corporate executives authorizing the use of classified technologies, civilian station managers, evacuating non-essential personnel, and scientists like herself, frantically checking calculations that had been derived in minutes rather than the months such work usually required. But it was another voice that made Elena's eyes snap open in shock. A voice she had hoped never to hear again, transmitted on an open channel that every human in the solar system could receive. "Citizens of Earth," came the measured aristocratic tones of Admiral Catherine Cross, her words carrying the weight of absolute authority and decades of accumulated rage. "This is Admiral Cross of the Outer Reach Collective. In 35 minutes, your ultimatum expires. I want you to understand exactly what that means." The main display shifted to show an external view of the approaching fleet, and Elena felt her breath catch in her throat. The vessels were unlike anything in Earth's naval registry. Sleek, predatory shapes that seemed to drink in the starlight around them, their hulls covered in what appeared to be some kind of adaptive camouflage that made them nearly invisible against the cosmic background. But it was their sheer size that made Elena's knees weak. Each ship was easily 3 times the length of Earth's largest dreadnought, and the flagship, presumably Admiral Cross's command vessel, was a kilometer long. Monument to human engineering and inhuman purpose. 20 years ago, Cross continued, her voice carrying the emotional weight of personal tragedy and collective grief, Earth's government decided that the outer colonies were expendable. When we asked for representation in the council that governed our lives, we were told we were too far away to matter. When we requested fair trade agreements that would allow our people to prosper, we were informed that our resources belong to humanity as a whole, meaning Earth. And when we finally declared our independence, choosing self-determination over subjugation, you sent your fleets to murder our children. Elena could hear the raw pain beneath Cross's controlled words, and for a moment she felt a stab of sympathy for the woman who was about to destroy her world. The colonial pacification. Wars had been a dark chapter in human history, one that most Earth citizens preferred not to think about. But the outer colonists had been forced to live with the consequences every day for 20 years. "I watched Earth's Marines burn the biodomes of New Geneva," Cross continued, her voice growing harder with each word. "I held dying children in my arms as your pacification forces used nerve gas against civilian populations. I saw what Earth's idea of human unity really meant. Unity under Earth's boot, with anyone who dared to dissent buried in unmarked graves on airless moons." The communication channels fell silent as Cross's words hit home. Even Elena, who had spent her career focused on pure research rather than politics, couldn't deny the historical record. The outer colonies had been treated as resource extraction zones rather than equal members of human civilization, and when they had finally rebelled, the response had been disproportionate and brutal. "But today," Cross said, and Elena could hear the grim satisfaction in her voice, "the balance of power has shifted. Today, you face the same choice we faced 20 years ago. Surrender your independence or watch your world burn. The difference is that we're offering you something Earth never offered us, the chance to survive." Elena felt her hands clench into fists as the full scope of Cross's plan became clear. This wasn't just revenge. It was a calculated attempt to restructure human civilization by eliminating Earth as the dominant power. With Earth destroyed or neutralized, the outer colonies would finally be free to develop their own form of government, their own economy, their own future. Admiral Cross, came a new voice. Ambassador Chen, speaking with the formal dignity of someone who understood that his next words might determine the fate of his species. This is Ambassador Chen Wei-Ming of the Terran Council. We are prepared to discuss terms for a negotiated settlement of our differences. Cross's laugh was as cold and sharp as interstellar space. Ambassador Chen, you misunderstand the situation. This is not a negotiation. This is a reckoning. Earth will surrender unconditionally, agree to the dissolution of the Terran Council, and submit to occupation by collective forces. Any attempt at resistance will result in the immediate activation of Project Helios. Elena felt her heart sink as she processed Cross's terms. Unconditional surrender would mean the end of Earth as an independent world, the dismantling of the political and economic systems that had governed human space for centuries, and the subjugation of billions of people to the will of colonial populations who had every reason to desire revenge. But as devastating as those consequences would be, Elena knew that the alternative was infinitely worse. Project Helios would turn Earth into a dead rock, eliminating not just the current government, but every person, every ecosystem, every trace of the world that had given birth to human civilization. Admiral Cross, Elena said, opening a direct communication channel to the collective flagship. This is Dr. Elena Vasquez. I'm the scientist who developed the FTL drive technology that made this confrontation possible. There was a moment of silence, and Elena could almost feel Cross evaluating her words, trying to determine what new variable had entered the equation. Dr. Vasquez, Cross said finally, her tone shifting slightly to acknowledge Elena's role in the current crisis. I confess I'm surprised to hear from you directly. Our intelligence report suggested you were in Earth Defense Force custody. I escaped, Elena said simply. Admiral, I know what you're planning to do and I understand why you believe it's necessary. But before you commit to a course of action that will stain human history with the blood of billions, I want you to consider an alternative. I'm listening, Dr. Vasquez, but I warn you, nothing you say will change the fundamental reality of this situation. Earth's crimes demand payment, and today that payment comes due. Elena took a deep breath and played her last card, the desperate gambit that would either save her world or ensure its destruction. Admiral, what if I could offer you something better than revenge? What if I could offer you justice? The silence that followed stretched so long that Elena began to wonder if Cross had terminated the connection. But finally, the Admiral's voice returned, carrying a note of curiosity that might have been humanity's salvation. Explain. The FTL technology I developed doesn't have to be a weapon of war, Elena said, her words racing against the countdown, timer that showed 31 minutes until the ultimatum expired. It could be a tool of liberation. Instead of destroying Earth, you could use it to create something unprecedented in human history. A true confederation of independent worlds, each governing itself according to its own principles, but connected by instantaneous communication and travel. Elena paused, letting the implications sink in before continuing. Admiral, you have the power to reshape human civilization. You could create a galaxy where no world dominates another, where resources are shared equitably, where the mistakes of the past are never repeated, but only if Earth survives to be part of that future. For a moment that seemed to stretch across geological time, the fate of two worlds hung in the balance. Then Cross spoke, her voice carrying a note of something Elena hadn't heard before. Hope. Dr. Vasquez, you have 29 minutes to convince me that Earth deserves to survive. Make them count. As Elena began to outline her vision for a post-conflict human civilization, she was unaware that her words were being heard by every person in the solar system. On Mars, in the asteroid belt, aboard the orbital habitats of Jupiter's moons, and In the deep space installations beyond Pluto, millions of people listened as a scientist who had never held political office offered humanity a future that none of them had dared to imagine. The war that had seemed inevitable minutes before was transforming into something unprecedented. A negotiation for the soul of human civilization, conducted in the shadow of mutual annihilation, with the survival of a species depending on whether two brilliant, wounded people could find common ground in the vast darkness between the worlds. But even as Elena spoke, her sensors were detecting something that made her blood run cold. Deep in the outer system, beyond even the collective's fleet, other ships were moving, vessels with energy signatures unlike anything in human space, approaching the solar system at velocities that made Elena's FTL drive seem like a child's toy. Humanity's first contact with an alien civilization was about to occur in the middle of their civil war, and Elena realized with growing horror that Earth's surrender to the collective might be the least of their problems.